I wanted to hang a picture. I came down for the nail.
You messed up my whole house. Can't you do anything neatly? Can't you? Can't you do anything neatly? Can't you do anything neatly? Can't you? Can't you do anything neatly? Can't you do anything neatly?
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about Vault of Horror from 1973, the follow-up to the 1972 Tales from the Crypt, which we covered last week.
Yes.
This week we have 5 stories, 1 from Shock Suspense Stories and 4 from Tales from the Crypt.
It's amazing that none of them are from Vault.
None of them are from Vault of Horror, even though the opening credits of the movie say from the comic magazines Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror.
I noticed that too.
And last week there were only 2 stories from Tales from the Crypt.
What's in a name?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pause the podcast.
Pause the podcast, right.
I'm going to come right out the gate and say, pause the podcast,
okay.
Go watch this movie.
Excellent, okay. I'm going to say that too. I also wanted to point out, is maybe the opposite point of that, is that I've read these stories many times, but often forget what the twist was.
Oh, I see.
So even if you hear what the spoiler is, and you come back to it a year later, if you're like me, you'll be like, which one's this one?
Great.
So, we'll just go through the stories. Oh, so we won't cover the history of EC Comics, because we did that last week. So if you want to learn all about Bill Gaines and the Senate subcommittee hearings and how EC became a giant and then fell from grace, or, was essentially shut down and just turned into basically Mad Magazine at the end, go back and listen to that episode.
Absolutely.
We don't need.
We don't get a lot of feedback here at Comic Book Movie Oblivion, but such feedback as we do receive has come down very firmly in favour of Kumar's enormous info dumps.
Okay, that's good. That's good. The one thing I didn't mention last week was
I asked for that.
It's a real sign of quality when somebody in an EC Comics story says, "Good Lord, choke."
I wanted to ask you about this. How choke?
Yes.
It is a. What is it? Is it a line of dialogue?
It's somebody going, good Lord. I guess.
I was wondering how we pronounce choke.
Yeah.
Because it's written in, not in brackets, but in parentheses
it might have
or something like that.
It's usually got something like that. There's some notice that it's not actually a spoken word, but it's in that Leroy lettering, which you mentioned last week. So it's almost like doesn't look hand lettered, doesn't look natural at all. It's just, good Lord, choke. And there was one of those last week, and that was in the one where the woman cut her husband up into tiny bits, and then when the men in the white coats came in to take her away, one of them said, "Good Lord, choke." And I was like, that was a nice touch. Okay, so I guess we can get straight into these 5 stories. So the first one is Midnight Mess from Tales from the Crypt, number 35. This is drawn by Joe Orlando, who we talked about at length last week. And but he didn't draw any of last week's, I don't think. Oh, yeah, he did. Oh, no, he didn't. And it's written by Gaines and Feldstein, as most of these are.
Brilliant.
Okay, so this is about a guy who has come to a really dingy town, or a dingy part of town, where his sister has decided to move for some reason. He's like, why is she living in this dump? And he shows up in town, like, dusk, and he meets this old dude in the street, and it's like, you got to get off the street, because there's vampires.
Right, he just comes right out and says vampires.
There's vampires. You gotta get off the street. It's almost dark. And this guy's like, the city dude's like, what? This is some crazy, eccentric dude. And he's gonna go to Sister. He's on his way to Sister's place, but he decides to stop at a restaurant.
Yes.
And the waiter's like, we've stopped serving food because it's almost dark and the vampires are gonna come out. And he's like,
what kind of restaurant closes at dinner time, first of all?
Yeah.
And second of all, Vampires? Really? You
Yeah.
expect me to believe this?
Yeah.
But they are closing nonetheless, so he leaves.
By the way, there's also a giant mirror, it's mentioned, on one wall of the restaurant to make it look like it's twice the size.
Right.
And anyway, he decides to leave because he can't get any food from this place. He finally goes to see his sister. And his sister's like, oh my god, like, 19 people have been killed by the people.
The vampires.
Blood's been drained. It's the vampires. She's like, not you too. And he's like, okay, whatever. Finally, they have a nice chat. He goes to bed. He can't sleep. So he has to go for a walk. So he goes down the street, and he sees that the restaurant is still open.
Now, it's
Or is reopened.
Yes, it's the same restaurant, isn't it?
Yes. But he goes and there's a different waiter. He sits down, and the new waiter starts describing what's on the menu's choices. So there's like, you can get roast scabs or like clots.
Well, first of all, no. He tells him in plain words that there's the soup, the juice,
Yes.
the roast,
Yes.
and the dessert.
Right.
And he goes, sounds fine.
That's the course, the 3 courses.
And he orders it,
Right.
and he's like, oh, this juice is very brothy.
Yes.
And then he's eating the soup, and he's like, oh, this soup is rich.
Yes, and then like the wine is like salty or something.
yeah, and then the waiter says, and how would you like your clots, sir?
Right.
Would you like them well done, rare? He goes,
Right.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
How would you like your clots?
Yes.
And
he freaks out.
yeah.
And that's when the waiter realizes this guy's a human, not a vampire.
Yes.
And he's been eating the food. There's a great, George Leonard does this great panel of him like freaking out as he realizes he's been eating blood.
Yes. Well, my favourite panel... Oh, well, okay, please continue, and we'll get to my favourite panel.
So he flips out, and then he looks in the mirror, that giant mirror, and he only sees his own reflection, not anybody else in the place. Then he realizes they are actually vampires, and his sister...
His sister rocks up. She's a vampire, too.
She's a vampire, too.
She tells him that, in the olden days, vampires hunted for their food, but we live in much like man hunted for his food.
Yes.
But we live in the modern era, and we like to have our dishes served up to us now. And my favourite panel is her telling her brother about everything he's just eaten, and his brow is dappled with sweat, and he stuck his tongue out.
Yeah.
And he has a single word of dialogue, which is, of course, choke! She says, this restaurant serves blood dishes, like a vegetarian restaurant serves vegetable dishes. Blood juice cocktail, hot blood consommé, roast blood clots, French fried scabs, blood sherbet. Joke!
Yeah. So then they surround him, and they pick him up, they string him up, they hang him upside down, and they literally put a tap in his throat.
Yep.
And to get fresh blood out of him.
Yes.
And that's how the story ends. Really lovely atmospheric drawings by Joe Orlando, especially like the opening panels where he's coming down the street. Story-wise, I felt this one is a little bit weaker. Maybe.
Agreed.
Maybe I just remembered the twist. Like I knew the sister was obviously a vampire. Maybe.
This is. I mean, we're gonna. I want to talk. I'm starting to talk about the film already. This is handled so much better in the film.
Yeah,
which we'll get to.
Yes.
Brilliant adaptation in the film.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a bit dull. They come right out the gate with the vampires.
Yes, they announced it, because everybody's warning him that they're vampires, and then the vampires, it is vampires.
And then, they're vampires.
It's not a twist like they're werewolves or something. Yeah. Were the other people, were the other 19 victims, or 17, or however many there were they all lured to the...
Yes, they all went into the restaurant. So
they weren't killed in the street?
No, they wandered into the restaurant.
Okay.
That's mentioned in the comic book.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding me that. I'd forgotten about that. Yes.
Okay.
They all wandered into the restaurant as well.
Yeah. That doesn't seem like the best system either for catching. I think that's a bit...
No, because they don't... That's not... No. The restaurant itself serves prepared blood.
Right.
So presumably brought from somewhere else.
That's right. But sometimes they have a special... Yeah. Somebody wanders in.
But if someone wanders in, they get to have the fresh... And, he says, can't beat fresh squeezed or fresh from the tap or something.
But then how did, the old guy at the beginning who warned him, who's a human being, because he's walking around in the daytime, how did the city folk know that there are victims with drained blood? It's very careless of them if they're killing people in the restaurant and then leaving the bodies out on the street.
Yeah, they're just dumping them on the street when they're done with them.
Yeah. Okay.
It's got some holes in it.
Yeah, a few. But again, as I said, the artwork's really lovely in it. Okay, the next one is Neat Job. This one is from Shock Suspense Stories issue 1. This one is drawn by Jack Kamen. It's our first Jack Kamen. In fact, we've got 2 Jack Kamens in this episode. I love Jack Kamen because he has this way of drawing women that they can be really either wholesome or real femme fatales. This one we've got a real wholesome lady.
Yes.
And it starts with these cops questioning this lady, like, why'd you do it? We don't know what she's done. But she recounts a story how she wanted to get married. Desperate to have a husband, get married. So she married this guy that she didn't really love, but she just wanted a husband. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about last week with the real 50s moral, like what kind of life you're supposed to have versus what EC was showing you.
Right.
So she's like, okay, I'm supposed to have this normal marriage. She marries this guy, seems to be okay at the honeymoon, then they come back to town, they settle into their life, and now the cracks start to show. Well, I would say more than cracks. Let's say huge canyons start to show. This guy is a neat freak. Yeah. And he needs every single thing to be perfectly in its place.
Yeah. He's compulsive.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
He has this very elaborate system of checks for when things in the cupboards are used.
Yes.
You have to make
There's a checklist on the door of the cupboard.
Yeah.
And when you move anything, you have to mark it off or whatever. So he's bought this house already, which she hates. It's this old mansion. It's full of antiques, which she hates. She hates the antiques. She hates all this stuff.
She's hoping to do some decorating or some spring cleaning or to put her own stamp on the house, and he absolutely won't have a bar of it.
Yeah.
And yes, it's palpable the kind of pressure she's under.
Yeah.
It's really ratcheting up from panel to panel.
Yeah, and I mean, even, I'm looking at by page 3, like, Jack Kamen's so great drawing her face and the anxiety on her face and his glee at his house and then his rage when she's rearranged the furniture or whatever.
He really blows up whenever she touches something or moves something or does something wrong.
Yeah.
And his absolute holy of holies, his sanctum sanctorum, you might say, is his workshop in the basement.
Yeah.
And that is where absolutely everything is neat as a pin.
Yeah.
He keeps his individual screws or screw types in different jars.
Yes, labeled.
Organized by, labeled jars, organized by length, width, thread, all the sorts of stuff that you never knew about screws. And that is the one place where she is never to go.
Yeah.
Because it is where he can get away from her terrible, messy ways. And of course, she's not terribly messy at all. She's trying her absolute best.
Yes.
To deal with these impossible demands.
Yes. So, and she's like put his laundry in the wrong drawer and stuff. And every little speck of dust he's like freaking out about. He's berating her about this stuff all the time. So finally one day she's home and then a picture comes loose off the wall and smashes and she freaks out. She's like, she goes
just falls by itself.
And the thing I love about this story especially is we talked about the EC Comics and the mania and the panic and paranoia. And this one we've got 2 characters that are suffering it at the same time. It's not just one of them. Because he's like crazy about this neatness and she's panicking about his mania.
Yeah.
So she's like, "Oh my God, I gotta fix this." So she goes down to his workshop. She picks up a jar, but accidentally another jar of nails or screws falls off the shelf, shatters. So now you've got shattered glass and the nails everywhere, and she hasn't fixed the picture. So she's trying to tidy up, but he gets home. Don't know if it's early or what, just gets home and she's like, "Oh my God," and he comes downstairs. First he sees a picture upstairs.
And starts complaining about it loudly.
Yes. And starts shouting down the stairs. He comes down the stairs, he's like, "What have you done?"
And she just snaps.
Yeah. She says, "Can't you do anything neat?" He screams, "Can't you do anything neat?" In his glorious shaded close-up shot of his face, and then she picks up an axe. We see a panel of her, just her hand holding this axe, and then we cut to the police interview that we opened the story with.
Yes.
And she says, I remember doing that. I remember wanting to show him I could be neat. I remember I wanted to be a neat job. I cleaned up everything when I was finished. And then we see all the jars in the basement are now labeled with body parts like eyeballs, kidney, liver, and she says, "Look for yourselves. I cleaned up the blood, every drop." And one of the cops says, "Yeah, lady, you certainly did a neat job." And the other says, "Choke, very neat."
Choke. Yeah. Where did all the screws go? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, good question. But she's really she's so wholesome and innocent about the. Oh yeah, everything went black. She says.
Yeah.
Well, she doesn't remember the actual murder, but she does remember the cleaning up. That's the part she remembers doing. Yeah. So this is a real. I really quite love this one. And the twist is really, this is one I absolutely remember the twist of. It didn't matter. It's a real journey getting there. And I'd kind of forgotten that in that opening splash page, the jars behind the cops are the ones that are filled with body parts.
I see.
I'd forgotten that little
they're
detail.
speaking to her in the basement.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, very good. Very good. Your appreciation for that one came through very clearly.
Did you have any comments you want to add or anything? No. Okay. Next, we got Tales from Crypt number 33. This story is called This Trick Will Kill You. This one is arts by George Evans and Jack Kamen. As far as I can tell from the credits I found online, it was Al Feldstein wrote this and Bill Gaines did not.
Okay.
In fact, I think the rest of the credits are just Feldstein on writing. So this one is about this couple who are stage magicians.
Yes.
And they travel to India looking for new tricks they can add to their act.
Yes.
Yeah. But they've kind of seen them all before. There's nothing... They're not really finding anything new or interesting. But finally they come across this girl who does this magic rope trick where she plays this like flute.
It's like a snake charm a bit.
Yes.
But the rope comes out instead.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's pretty familiar. It's a trope, isn't it? The rope trick where it goes up.
I've heard of it before, certainly. And then she climbs it. I mean, they think it is a stage magic trick of some sort. Yes. But he checks for like wires in the rope or trapdoor or something. He can't find it.
He knows all the tricks and he can't figure it out. Yes,
that's right. He's seen everything. He's like bored of all the other tricks. He's trying to... Yes. And he doesn't know how she's done this one. He tries to buy it from her. By the secret of the trick, she refuses to sell.
Yeah.
Tries to buy the actual rope itself from her. She's like, no. So finally he goes back to his wife in their hotel room, and they
must have it. They must have the trick.
So they convince the girl to come up to the hotel and demonstrate it in their hotel room.
Yes.
And the wife is like, well, we gotta kill her.
Yep.
And get the trick. And the magician, the husband is like, well, I'm not so sure about this, but he agrees to it because there's no other way they're gonna get it from her. So so the girl shows up. She starts to do the trick, and then they kill her.
Yep.
And they figure out that they can't figure out what the trick is, but they do figure out that playing the flute causes the rope.
Just like the girl did. It causes the rope to rise.
Yep.
And the wife, in her role as magician's assistant, climbs the rope and says, "This is just how we'll do it back in America." Right? And she climbs to the top of the rope and
vanishes into thin air. And the end of the rope is frayed. Suddenly her body parts rain down.
That's wild.
There is a ceiling fan in an earlier panel. I don't know if we're supposed to assume that she was chopped up.
How could she be chopped up
in another
by a fan?
dimension by this fan? I don't know.
She
disappeared. Anyway, maybe she goes into a hell dimension, and then she's like torn apart and then thrown back into our dimension.
Something bad happens.
Something very bad happens.
Like the top of the stairs in the stone tape.
Yes, or there's a few Hellraiser comparisons in the story because then the rope comes and coils around the guy's neck and he hangs from the ceiling where the end that should be tied to the ceiling is hovering in midair, and then like the hotel staff come in and they find him hovering in midair, strangled to death.
Yes.
And the guy says, "Good Lord," as he comes through the door.
No choke this time.
No choke, but he says, "Good Lord." And the description from the Crypt Keeper tells us that they found the body of the girl, but also says the next day the girl was back in the market, like the girl that was dead.
Yeah.
So what is it? It was.
Does it say that there in the comic?
It says, "Look for her in that alleyway. She'll be there with her rope. Just be careful. Don't let her string you along." What happened to the... Oh, yeah, so...
Do it in the...
Oh, no, sorry, so they don't find the girl. It says, they tried to cut poor Herbie down. The rope just collapsed, and he fell to the floor amid Inez's dismembered remains. As for the Indian girl, they found no trace of her. What happened to her body? Next time you're in Calcutta, look for her in that alleyway. She'll be there with her rope.
Okay.
Which is very similar to the ending of the Hellraiser movie. I can't remember if the novel in that way, but the guy selling the box reappears.
Pleasure,
Yes,
Mr.
reappears
Cotton.
at the market. Exactly. So yeah, something like that is going on. I don't know what to say about this one, but I love the goriness of it. I really love the body parts raining down on his head.
I did like the body parts raining down. That's what I've written down.
And I did like the kind of Hellraiser connections.
They didn't occur to me, but yeah, they're present since you point them out. Yeah.
I don't know quite what else to say about it. I think that I will say more about when we get to the movie.
When we get to the film.
Yeah, because I think it will cover some of the same.
Let's move on to Drawn and Quartered.
Yes. Okay. So this one. Oh wait a second. We got Bargain and Death next, don't we?
Oh, you're right.
Yes,
sorry.
Bargain and Death. Okay, this one is from Tales from the Crypt 28. This one is drawn by Jack Davis. We've got 2 Jack Davises this episode, written by Feldstein. Jack Davis was he was the cartoonist of the EC artists. He had a very loose style. It was more in keeping with Mad Magazine, but sometimes he draw these horror stories in a jokey, cartoony way that was at odds with the horror that was happening. But I think they knew, like, he was there's a groundskeeper kind of guy or janitor or character in this who's so hilariously goofy.
Yeah.
He's such a Jack Davis character that I feel like they were kind of writing to his strengths. But there's definitely a dichotomy happening there that they're trying to exploit. But anyway, this one... so we start with these 2 medical students who can't get a body to work on. They really want a corpse, basically. And they decide they're going to rob a grave.
Yeah.
And then we have a cut to these other 2 fellows who've come up with an insurance scam. These 2 friends... looking back now, you'd have to say they're more than friends. For one, to have the other's life insurance.
It didn't even occur to me.
But I was like, okay. So they have this $40,000 life insurance. So the scam is this got one guy. He's found this like drug that will make you appear completely dead. He's like, I'm going to give you the drug, and you'll appear dead.
Yeah.
And we'll bury you as fast as possible. You won't be allowing an embalming. We'll just say no. He wants to be buried immediately. Next day. Yeah. And then I'll dig you up, and then we'll get the insurance money. Well, I'll get the insurance money, I'll dig you up, we'll split it 50-50. Yeah. And then we'll leave town.
There's a lot of elements in here. There's some wacky elements.
Well, yes, and it's because right out of the gate, I mean, even the Crypt Keeper knows it's wacky, because he's commenting that, like, oh, can you guess what's going to happen next? Because we've cut to this next scene, it's very obvious that the students are going to dig up the guy that's been buried alive, and the story doesn't try to hide that at all. No. I'm pretty sure the Crypt Keeper comments on it.
There are a few outlandish notions that we have to accept.
Yes.
You know, the med students who want to dig up a body to help with their anatomy studies.
Yes.
Where are they going to keep it? Are they going to... You know, and also this drug just magically happens to simulate the exact conditions of death without killing you. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an old trope in fiction. But usually, you know, one outlandish thing... Yeah. There's a few too many. And of course we have the big coincidence of them digging up.
It piles up in 8 pages, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot for 8 pages for sure, but I did find myself like laughing along with the Crypt Keeper at like when we have to meanwhile here are these guys running the insurance scam. It's very obvious this is a body they're going to dig up. So they go out there with this goofy groundskeeper or whatever he is. He's like a superintendent or something. I don't know. And they're like, okay, we're going to dig up the body. Meanwhile, the guy that was supposed to dig up his friend has decided he's going to run off with the insurance money.
Yes. He has no intention of digging him up.
No.
He's going to keep all 40
So the guy wakes up in the grave and he's like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. Where's Alex or whatever his name was? Why isn't he coming to dig me up?
Alex.
And he's desperate to get out of there.
He's running out of air.
Yes, he's running out of air. At the last second, these dudes dig him up. And he sits up in his coffin.
Yeah.
They freak out and run down the street. Meanwhile, Alex...
The two med students freak out.
The two med students freak out and run down the street. They leave the body...
Right as Alex happens to be driving past.
Alex happens to be driving...
In the brand new car he's bought with the proceeds of the insurance money.
Yes, and he's like, oh my God, there's people on the road. And then he crashes and he dies.
Yeah.
And then the med students are like...
Well, they go home.
They're like, holy moly, and they go back. But then the groundskeeper produces the corpse of the guy.
He shows up and he says, where's my $5 because I've got your corpse, sorry about the damage to the head. And he's beaten the guy to death.
Yes, with the crowbar he used to open the coffin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is fine. It's been done way better. This probably reminded you as well of a Steve Ditko story in Creepy that he illustrated.
Yes.
Where the guy goes to hell and barters with Satan to return him just as he was.
Yeah.
And he wakes up in the coffin, and then some gravekeepers dig him up. And they beat him to death, and he goes straight back to hell again.
I think Feldstein knew all those cliches. I think he knew the buried alive cliche for sure. I think the point of the story is all the stuff piling up. I think it's exactly the thing you're complaining about is exactly what he was like. Let's try to have 10 things happen in this 8-page story.
The big
all
one
these
for me is
coincidences pile up.
To me, just set it at a time when people are digging up corpses for anatomy. Time of the resurrectionist men.
Yeah.
There's I don't think there's anything specific in the story that couldn't be set in the late 19th century. You can have your magic drug then, that's fine.
I think, wasn't there something that said it was like the 40s or... There, I feel like it was set in an earlier time, or I might be confusing with a different story.
But, famously there was a time in European history when unscrupulous characters were digging up freshly buried bodies to provide them to medical schools because, illegally. And the medical schools would pay for it, and they were called resurrection men. Set this story in the 19th century with some resurrection men. I think instead of this kind of loopy thing with the med students, it was a bridge too far for me, Kumar.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I do feel like it was set not in 1955 or whenever the story came out, but
and that just makes it worse. Then if you've already set it in a different decade, go back a little further and set it at the time when we know people were doing this.
Yes.
Whatever.
I won't be able to find it right now.
No worries. Anyway, let's move on to Drawn and Quartered.
Okay. So this is another Jack Davis one, written by Feldstein. So this one we've got an artist who is set up in the Caribbean somewhere. In the movie, I think it's specifically Haiti.
It is Haiti.
Oh, it is Haiti. It is. Of course it is. Of course it is. So...
He's practicing his art. He's poor. He's dirt poor.
He's forced to live in poverty.
He moved to Haiti with his last cent that he earned selling his paintings cheaply because he was told by a cabal of people with interests in art that his work was no good.
Yeah. The Crypt Keeper tells us all this in one panel.
Yeah.
There were 3 dudes. There was an art... there was a guy with a gallery who said, we can't show your paintings or whatever, nobody wants to see them.
The dealer, the collector, and the critic.
Yes, and the critic's like, your art's crap. And the collector is like, well, I'll buy
them
off
your hands. Yeah.
Dirt cheap. So he gets enough money, he goes to Haiti. An old friend shows up. He's like, hey, I saw your paintings were selling for like $5,000 in this gallery. And it's the gallery of that guy that had said he couldn't show them.
Yep.
And he said, the artist Moore, this guy, he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, the friend says, that same critic says your art is genius.
He's been scammed.
And the collector, so
the guys collaborated
yep.
to convince him that his paintings were, to sell at a loss, and then they've sold them at a massively inflated price.
Yes.
Or for what they're actually worth.
Yes.
After convincing him that they were worth less.
Yeah.
They were colluding.
Yeah.
So he's angry.
Yeah. So
Lucky he's in Haiti because it's time to buy some voodoo.
Yeah. So he convinces his friend to lend him some money because he's going to buy my revenge, are his exact words. So he goes out to this voodoo ritual. It's just happening.
Yeah, it's Haiti, man. It's just all voodoo rituals, isn't it?
And he's like, look, I want revenge on these people that stole from me. So the guy's like, okay, put your hand in this boiling pot, your painting hand. And he's like, what? My hand in this boiling pot. And he puts it in there, but there's like no pain.
But it didn't hurt,
yes.
He says, looking at his hand.
Yes, it didn't burn. And the guy's like, okay, give me that's it. Voodoo's done.
Now, go. Are you going to give me a doll to stick pins in? He goes, you're an artist, you don't need a doll.
Yeah. You can draw. You don't need a doll, yeah.
And that's it?
Yep. And he's like, what? So I guess he paid the guy anyway. Yep. He feels like he's scammed. It seems like he thinks he's scammed at the end.
He goes home and finishes his self-portrait that he's working on.
Yep. And then he randomly draws like a vase.
Yep.
Just for, I don't know, frustration. He tears up the paint, the drawing that he's in on the vase, and then behind him, coincidentally, like the wind or something knocks down the vase that he was drawing.
It's not coincidental, is it?
And then it smashes. He's like, wait a second. It's voodoo. And he's like, I gotta be sure. He draws a piece of bread, and then he erases half of it, and then a rat appears and eats the bread.
Eats half the bread.
Yes, exactly.
And only half. And finally he makes a mark on his self-portrait. He looks at his self-portrait and he thinks, whoops, I finished that after I voodooed up my hand. Yeah. He makes a mark on its cheek. He sits down to wait. He nods off.
I think he was even drunk or something. But anyway, he falls asleep.
He nods off, and then he falls face first into the broken vase and gets a cut in the exact spot. Yep. So now he is at once horrified and excited. Yes. Because on the one hand, he knows the tools of his vengeance are at hand. What he draws, he controls. On the other hand, he has a problem. He must protect the painting.
Yes. Yes, because it's like the picture of Dorian Gray at this stage. It is like the picture of Dorian Gray.
Any harm comes to it will be bound on him.
Yeah. So he borrows money from this dude again so he can go back to the big city and get his revenge on these guys. He moves back in his old apartment, his old studio, where the landlord had kicked him out, but he lets him back in. I think he gets revenge on that landlord.
He does.
Panel about
to show that he's a bit of a jerk.
Yeah.
So his landlord threw him out for not being able to pay his rent. So he comes back and he gives him the back rent and then says, oh, you kicked me out, huh, when I didn't have any money?
Right.
Well, you won't be kicking anyone anymore.
Yes,
and then he damages his legs on the painting. Yeah. And then the guy gets run over by a car.
Yes. So then he paints the guy the art critic, I think, next.
Yes.
And then he like slashes out the eyes of it, or like draws out, scratches out the eyes. And then meanwhile, we see that the art critic, his girlfriend, throws acid in his face for being a Lothario, and they can't see it. He can't see anymore. Then he draws the collector, who said that his pictures were worthless, and that he couldn't sell them. And then
this pun sucks. He says, "You treated me in an underhanded way.
Right.
Well, you won't be handed anymore.
Right.
Ha ha. This is handled much better in the film.
Yes. No hands for you." He erases his hands, and then the guy is working on a mat cutter at the time.
Yep.
And then it slips and it cuts off his hands.
We only see it. We don't really see it
from behind. We see him behind, and we see he screams, and somebody else is in the foreground saying, "Oh my God, he got his hands! Call an ambulance."
Then then he's short of breath.
Yes, the artist is suddenly short of breath, and he realizes it's the painting in the safe.
He's put the painting in the safe.
In an airtight safe. Yeah.
And now, apparently the painting needs to breathe.
Yeah.
It consumes oxygen. It doesn't matter. It's magic. He quickly gets the painting out of the safe, and he goes, oh, well, I have to put it in a place where it can get air, and probably sunlight too. Do I need to give it meals? I don't know. But in the meantime, he decides to put it in a room with plenty of light.
Yes. And there's like a skylight. Yeah.
Yes, a skylight. And he even cracks the skylight open a little bit so there'll be plenty of fresh air.
Yes.
He decides to deal with that a little more seriously later, but for now he's off to visit the last member of the coterie.
Yeah.
He plans to extort him.
Yes.
He's going to show him his power and extort him, but he's never going to get the chance because the guy painting outside the window...
Yeah, there's a guy painting like a billboard outside. He drops a can of turpentine, which smashes through the skylight, and then as soon as that happens, our painter, the artist, Moore, is hit by like a truck or something.
It's a train.
Oh, a train, okay.
Yeah.
And then we see that the painting, which he left under the skylight, is now completely like ruined,
Not only
like
that,
mangled.
it's gruesome.
It's like melted,
because it's run
Yes.
from the turpentine.
Yes. So we know what's happened
we can
to his
only
face.
imagine what kind of horrific
Yes.
damage has happened to his face because of the train.
Yes.
To make it look like
Right.
a painting that's run from Terps.
It also means that the art gallery guy got away with it.
Yeah, unfortunate.
He never gets his comeuppance.
He doesn't get his.
No.
If only there was an adaptation where he did.
Yes. Okay, so I guess we can get to the movie unless you have
Is
anything
that
else. You
all
wanna
of them?
Yeah, that's all 5.
Oh, brilliant. No, that was great. Very good. All right, so yeah, let's get to the movie. First of all, I've got a little bit of detail about Amicus.
Okay.
This movie studio.
Yes.
In Britain. Nothing near the level of detail which we're accustomed to having from you, Kumar, but...
Well, it's not Hammer, so I'm imagining there's not that much...
No, it's not Hammer, but there's quite a lot of overlap with Hammer,
Okay.
as you know, because they have many of the same stars.
Yes.
So, Amicus is active between 1962 and 1977. They made 28 films,
Okay.
of which 7 were horror anthologies.
Oh!
So very much their bread and butter.
Okay.
In fact, their very first film was Dr. Terror's House of Horrors,
Whoa.
which was also an anthology horror film.
Okay.
As I think we discussed last week, it was founded by 2 Americans,
Okay.
New Yorkers to be exact.
Interesting.
I
I don't think we mentioned that.
Okay, a kind of what a article I read describes as men of contrasting temperaments.
That throws water on my whole thing about the British sentiment
Or
of...
does it? Oh,
Yeah,
we'll get to
okay,
it. Or does
alright,
it? We'll get to it. No, well done bringing that up. We will get to it. Anyway, it does 2 New Yorkers, and they were attracted to Britain because of something called the Eady levy, and this was a tax on box office receipts, which was then redistributed to films that were produced in Britain with predominantly British labour.
Okay.
So 85% of the film had to be shot in UK or the Commonwealth, and it had to be done with British labour. Something like no more than 3 salaries could be paid to someone not of British extraction.
Okay.
So there are very much people involved in Amicus
Right.
who have British sensibilities and would have been
Okay.
along the lines of what you were pointing out.
But I'm assuming the 2 brothers would have been 2 of those salaries.
They weren't brothers, but yeah.
So they only could afford one other non-Brit.
Exactly. So everything was a budget operation.
Yeah.
They were doing things on the cheap, which is part of the reason why they liked anthology movies so much. Anthology movies were attractive to them because you could get big name actors, but only pay them for a couple of days' work.
Okay.
And then you could put them on the poster for the movie to market it for a fraction of what it would normally cost to employ them for the life of a film. And that's how they snagged people like Christopher Lee. So Christopher Lee appeared in Amicus films, and of course Peter Cushing, who was in the film last week. And some productions, Jack Palance was in one of their films. Donald Pleasance.
Oh, wow.
David Warner.
Okay, wow,
And so these would have been splashed across the poster, but of course would only appear for in 1/5 of the movie or less.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They would recruit name actors like that. They didn't care who. They liked to recruit a name actor to get their name on the billboard, and they only cared about recognition. It could be so someone who was just starting out, like a rising star. Apparently, like Tom Baker, who was apparently becoming something of a property at this point. Someone famous from the stage. Like Ralph Richardson, the guy that played the Crypt Keeper last week. Or a former star in the doldrums, like Terry Thomas. Terry Thomas, another comic book movie Oblivion All-Star.
Yes,
because of course,
I was surprised by that, for sure. Did not know he was in this and was surprised when he showed up in it. Yes, was in Danger Diabolic. Yes, so this one had a different director, but had the same writer, Milton Subotsky.
Right. Presumably British. To comply with the Eady.
Yes,
citation needed.
Right. Okay. Did you have any more details about this?
No, that's it. That's it. We can move on. Yep.
All right. So this one is a little bit different. Well, I guess it's obviously different. So instead of starting out in a cemetery with Bach, we start out in London in this high rise.
Well, the first shot is the Thames.
Yes.
And then as you say, we're in a lift.
We're in a lift. A bunch of guys get in this elevator. I started laughing because the music is just blaring. And
they're
it's just these guys. It's just these guys standing in an elevator.
It should be Muzak, but instead we've got these blaring chords.
Yes.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And initially
they shuffle around and look awkwardly at one another.
Yeah, and then I was like slightly disappointed because I was like, these guys all look like they're from the same walk of life. They're in the same high-rise building. So they're all like at the same level of class and society or whatever. Like, this is not like EC, because EC would have people all over the place. And yet the movie kind of corrects for this as we go through it. So
they arrive at... They
press their ground floor. They're going to ground floor, but it keeps going.
It goes straight to the basement.
Yes. And they get out in the basement. They're like, it looks like it's set up for a party or something. There's like round room.
It's only a small room. Yeah, it's like, round. There are 5 chairs.
And then there's no button to go back up in the elevator, so they're kind of stuck.
The elevator door closes behind them, and as you say, there's no call button on this side. So they sit down, and to pass the time, they start talking.
Yes.
There's a great shot, bird's eye shot of them all sitting down. Yes,
that was an excellent shot. Yeah, it's in the movie twice actually. Where
and there's booze on the table. I mean, if you'll permit me to digress for a moment here, I really like this movie.
Yeah,
really liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it so much more than Vault of Horror. Tales from the Crypt. This is Vault of Horror we're talking about. I loved it so much more than Tales from the Crypt. And one of the things I really liked about this film, as I like about a few other films that we've talked about, is how much of a time capsule it is. This is one of the most 70s movies I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. The stuff they're wearing. Yep. They're wearing yellow shirts. Tom Baker is wearing a corduroy suit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we get to Neat Job, the apartment that they live in, the opposite from
I can't wait to talk about Neat Job. Oh my god. The room that they're in, everyone's drinking in every vignette.
Yes.
Everyone is drinking all the time.
Yeah.
As soon as someone walks into a scene, they walk over to a sideboard or a bar or a table and they pick up a bottle of spirits.
Yeah.
Half the time they squirt some seltzer in it.
Yeah.
And then they just start drinking.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. And as you said, the houses, the room they're in at the start, the houses they're in, it's so kitsch.
Yeah.
The vampire restaurant. Oh my god, there's no windows.
Yeah.
The wallpaper in the house in Neat Job.
Yeah.
It's like yellow, patterned yellow or it's just it's worth the price of admission.
I think the kind of the pink house in All Through the House is kind of the closest. It's like the whole movie of this is like
even though it was a year earlier, it feels less grounded in the 70s. This one, you could not possibly mistake, maybe because it was in 72, but by 73, I don't know. But now, this, you could not mistake it for any other decade.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful.
Yeah. So there's no horror host.
No.
In this one, which is also a little bit of a bummer for me. But these guys just start talking to each other. One guy starts describing a dream. Yes. I can't remember why he started talking about the dream, but he had this recurring nightmare or something. And his dream is the midnight mess dream. So
that's our framing device. We've all arrived in this room, and the one thing, someone starts talking about a dream, and it becomes clear pretty quickly that everyone is having these dreams.
Well, some of them are described as visions or not even dreams necessarily, but like thoughts they dwell on or something.
And they're a bit ambiguous about, as you say, there's a bit of ambiguity. Some people want to share, some people are less willing to share.
Yes.
As you mentioned, there's no Crypt Keeper, which I don't have a problem with, because I think as a device, people, with the previous film coming out the previous year, it's a device people would have been expecting.
Right.
And in fact, I think they play a bit with Tom Baker. Yes. Tom Baker he looks pretty sinister in his flannel suit.
And one of the other guys at the end, the very end of the movie, when the four of them disappear, one guy's left to give us a bit of narration.
But they do tease, I think, that, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But they do tease, Tom Baker seems a bit sinister. Because he has that wonderful voice.
Yes.
And he's got a long beard.
Yes.
And he's doing a lot of the probing. So if you didn't know, well, I mean, you think, oh, is Tom Baker the one that's brought them here? Because he seems to have a strange interest.
Yes, except that there are 5 of them. It was kind of...
Well, it's just, you don't know what's happening.
Yes.
I like that it plays around a bit. I think it's being subtle and a little bit clever.
Yes.
But as you say, Midnight Mess, the first man's vision. This starts...
right, so this one started,
and
I didn't... So this guy talks about this dream he's had, and basically this guy, who's the teller of the story, meets with like a private detective that has located a woman. I don't know if he says it's his sister or not. And then he kills the detective and takes the money that he had paid him.
The PI. Yeah. So this guy's cold. This is a cold dude.
Yeah, and you're like, why did he kill this guy? It's just like, okay, we don't know. And I'm like, which story was this one again? I was trying to remember.
Right.
Okay. Then he goes to this other end of town, and then he first knocks on it. So
someone stops it.
Someone stops on the
street.
street.
Where's so and so? And they say it's here, but you should be. You're not from here, are you? He's like, yes. How'd you know? He goes, because it's getting dark.
Yeah.
You need to get indoors because of them.
Yes. Because of them.
No vampires this time because of them.
Yeah.
A great improvement.
So I think does he go to see his sister first?
No, he goes to the restaurant.
He goes to the restaurant.
It's great.
Same thing happened, but there's no giant mirror on the wall at this stage.
This restaurant is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's the darkest. It's the most closed-in, claustrophobic, and it's just bric-a-brac everywhere.
Yeah. There's 2 other guys
burgundy
in
columns with burgundy vine on it.
Weird place. Very weird place.
Burgundy lampshades. Heavy velvet curtains. It is the most 70s room.
Yeah. Yes. So it's basically the same thing. The waiter says, we stopped serving food because it's almost dark, and they...
So what are you talking about? What kind of restaurant closes before 7 p.m.?
Yes. So he leaves without getting his food or whatever. He goes to his sister's place.
Yeah.
And he tells the sister... She's like, she says there's been 19 people killed, their blood drained from their bodies.
Yeah, she mentions that.
And he says, well, our dad died and he left you the inheritance. And then he pulls out a knife.
He says, for as long as you live.
Yes.
And then he pulls out a switchblade, flicks it open. This guy's really sinister.
Yeah.
He stabs her to death.
Yes.
He tells her he's been looking for her for a very long time, but then it turns out it's only 4 weeks since their dad died.
Yes.
But yeah.
So,
it's
this is
implied
another
that maybe
thing
she was hiding from him, but
I don't know.
But it doesn't matter. The real reason she's in the town.
I think she's just living in the vampire side of town.
Yes.
But
we've got a much better foreshadowing.
Well, yes.
Much better introduction to these characters.
Yes,
she's much more vulnerable in this, right?
But like Tales from the Crypt, they're trying to make the people worse than they were in the comics in order to have a comeuppance plot.
Yes.
Right? To just because in Midnight Mess in the comics,
he's just a regular guy.
His worst crime is refusing to believe 3 people that told him they were vampires.
I think like with Tales from the Crypt film, it's been done to partly to make it thematically more consistent across the various stories.
Right.
And I suppose to bring it in line with the framing device. But each story is a story of how a deserving person receives their karmic retribution.
Right.
And there are stories like that in the comics, but not every story is like that. But I suppose they want to make every story like that in this, so that the film has a theme.
Yes, and to justify the ending of both movies.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, which we're going to get to.
Yeah.
Which isn't going to be a surprise.
So he's killed his sister.
Stabbed her to death.
He goes outside, and then he sees that the restaurant, which was closed, is open again. He's like, what the hell? Brilliant. He goes over there, he sits down, as you corrected me before. The guy says there's a 3-course meal. He orders the 3-course meal. The restaurant's jammed now. It's packed with people.
They bring out what he thinks is tomato juice.
Yep.
It looks like a strawberry daiquiri because it's that Day-Glow blood like we had last week.
Yeah.
He says tomato juice, and the waiter sort of does a double take.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
He drinks a little bit of it, but obviously doesn't like it one bit. Leaves most of it there. Asks the waiter to take it. The waiter brings the soup again. He's sort of drinking it, obviously doesn't like it at all. And then the waiter asks him again how he would like his clots.
Yeah.
Blood clots, sir. Rare, medium, or well done. And then he looks at the soup, does a double take, spits.
Does a spit take, yes.
A spit take, rather.
Yeah. And then they pull open the curtain, which has a mirror behind it. Why is this mirror here behind a curtain?
Because they don't like looking in a mirror because they're not in it.
Why not have not have a mirror in the restaurant?
Because when it's in the daytime. I don't have a problem with this.
All right, okay.
It makes sense that these vampires would close them. Not want to look in a mirror.
So then we see that it's revealed that the restaurant is actually full of vampires, as in the comic. They've got weird fangs.
Well, the fangs don't pop out yet, do they? First his sister comes.
No, because we see the fangs.
Okay, we see the fangs?
We definitely see, because they got these weird, very long, skinny fangs. They don't look good. Sister shows up. She's alive because he didn't kill her. She's actually a vampire.
Yep.
And he didn't stake her through the heart or anything. So she shows up, and her fangs are a little bit better because she opens her mouth and then you see them. They're not like hanging over her lips. Yeah.
She wants, because of course they do the same thing. They stick a beer tap in his neck, and Dayglow daiquiris for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the end. That's the end of that.
Then we cut back to the room where everyone's...
I want to say that the music was, in contrast to the elevator scene, the music was quite subtle in this story. It worked much better.
Yeah.
I don't know why the music got all mixed up in the elevator. But anyway, so we go back to the basement. They're like, okay, that was just a weird dream you had, dude. And then we go into the next one, which is Terry Thomas.
Terry Thomas.
From Danger Depot Lake. So this is the story about the guy that gets married. He says he's going to get married because he wants... So we start with him and his friend in a restaurant. He's like, I'm going to marry this girl because I want someone to take care of me or something. I'm not sure what his logic was. But the guy's, when he hears who it is, he's like, whoa, she's like a catch. How did you get her?
And he goes, I think of myself as a catch.
Yes.
I'm very easy to get on with.
Yes.
So there's a bit of foreshadowing here. It took me an embarrassingly long time into this segment before I realised it was supposed to be funny.
Right. Yeah.
Because, of course, Terry Thomas is a comic actor, a bit down, fading out of his, presumably big in the 50s and 60s, but by the 70s is a bit of a fading light.
Right.
And I think they've cast him, and they're hamming up, unlike the comic, which is, as you said, really ratchets up the tension the further you go along. This one is more playing up the comic element.
Yes. So he doesn't go into flying to rages. He's more like a petulant kid. Like, you messed this up. It was supposed to be this lamp is supposed to be over here, not over there.
This lamp is supposed to be over here, and I need to reach out and get a magazine.
Yes. There's a scene where he literally puts on his wife's underwear without realizing, because it's been in his drawer.
And we see it. We see him in all his glory wearing women's underwear. That's when I thought, oh, this is meant to be funny.
Right. But he's always like, oh, you're not doing it right. He's like a little kid. He's not like this raging guy that you feel threatened by.
No.
And this actress, who I didn't write their name, but she's wonderful, and she's very sweet. And she puts up with this stuff like he's a kid. Oh, okay, I'll put that there. Yes, that will make you feel better.
It's a completely different dynamic to the one.
No, and as we said, they're living in this apartment is really Clockwork Orangey, kind of very mod.
It's so funny. We see it from the outside, and it's, as you say, it's supposed to be mod. It just looks so dated because it's clearly built. It's brand new in the 1970s. Yeah. And it looks like those 1970s dumps that you see around. It's got a lot of them in eastern Melbourne.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to see that as this kind of like this real modish house with his yellow wallpaper and hangings and and no windows and a closed-in kitchen. Oh, it's like a holiday. It's like those holiday houses that you go to every now and again. It's like that place you stayed in when you're having your renovations.
Yes. So one day he goes out. He says, "I'm going to come back at 6:00." And while he's out, she's like having fun at home. So she puts on records. She's got various records out. She's just leaving them out of the sleeves. And she's having a drink or two. She's reading some magazines.
Well, first he offers to make her dinner. Well, this isn't really important, but we established that it's the same. He has the same system as the guy in the comics.
Yes.
Where when you open the cupboards and there's a tick mark for every tin of tomatoes, and you erase a tick when you consume a tin, so he'll know exactly how many are left when he opens the cupboard, and when it gets down to 1 tick, that's when it's time to go to the shops and get it back up to 3, so on and so on. And as you say, but it's not delivered with any menace. As you say, he's kind of petulant in his upper class twit kind of voice. And as you say, the woman doesn't really seem put on at all. She's more just kind of putting up. With all
and
of
she's
this.
She doesn't even seem that bothered by it.
No.
Like she's definitely not threatened. She's just like, oh, he's just like a kid. And we even get a scene of her talking to her friend.
She doesn't really mind it, but I just don't seem to be able to do anything for him when it comes to keeping his house.
Yes. But something happens. She thinks she spills something.
Oh well, it's a comedy. It's sort of like it's a snowball effect. She puts a glass. So she's day drinking. She's having this great big what I think is a gin and tonic, and she puts it down on a table, and it leaves a ring. And that sets off a series of events.
That's right.
All of which get worse and worse.
Yes.
Because we know he's going to be home at 6.
Yeah.
And we keep getting cuts to the clock as it gets closer and closer to 6. She to mop up the spill, she knocks something over. When she goes to pick up the thing she knocked over, she knocks something else over.
But then she also then she remembers, oh, the records are out of the sleeves. Yeah. So there's all this stuff kind of going on. It's almost the level of mania that was supposed to be in All Through the House in the movie version that we had last week. We weren't
much
quite
better
getting.
in that one.
It's more like stuff is piling up. It's like
and she's drunk.
It's a bit like it reminded me of the scene where in Naked Gun where Frank Drebin is searching Ricardo Montalban's office, and then all the stuff starts going off at once, including like the player piano and stuff.
Like that. So that's it. We're supposed to find this funny, I think. It's not...
Yes.
This is supposed to be comic.
Yes.
And then, of course, the
picture falls off the wall.
Well, she knocks it off.
Yeah.
Because, again, this is... And then she runs down the stairs. She goes into a sacred workshop. It spills... she makes a mess, she drops the screws, Terry Thomas comes home, he comes downstairs, he goes off on another one of his petulant rants, winds up, and she's just really starting to freak out. It's all becoming a bit too much, because she's had the 10 minutes from hell.
And he says, can't you do anything neatly?
Can't you do anything neatly?
Yeah.
Can't you do anything neatly?
Yeah.
Can't you do anything neatly?
Yes.
He says it about 50 times, and then she screams, and buries the hammer in his head.
Yes, great shot of the hammer in the head.
It looks great.
It looks really good, and then she goes through this insane glee. She's laughing maniacally. She's so good, and I laughed so hard when she started cracking up. Yeah. I was laughing along with her, and then we get the shot, really long, lingering shot of the jars labeled with all the body parts in them. Body parts don't look so great, but the jars, her laughter, the whole thing pulls it together, I think.
Yeah.
But it's weird. I think tonally it's very different from...
It's hugely different.
From the Jack Kamen
as we've established. It's supposed to be humorous. I didn't find it particularly humorous. The ending's pretty funny. I'm embarrassed to say I kind of relate to Terry Thomas in this situation. Female listeners, if we have any, will be pleased to know my wife told me off. Okay. She very much related to the wife.
Right.
Situation.
Okay.
So there's a peek into my domestic situation there.
Okay, now we get to... Oh boy. Now we get to This Trick Will Kill You. So this is the one set in India with the rope trick. So we open with this bazaar in India. It's supposed to be in India. They got a lot of...
We do have we have some South Asian actors.
I think there's tons of them in the background. Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think even that male magician that they...
The fakir.
The fakir.
Well, he's a bit of a faker as well.
Yes. That's right. Well, he's just...
he's a magician. He's doing his...
He's just doing stage magic tricks. And this visiting magician decides to expose him on the street. Why?
Well, he seems like... I like the storytelling here. It's spoiled a bit because I read the comic first. But it's like you said, he's just doing his thing. He does talk a bit about the blessing of the gods.
Yeah,
but it's just stage. It's just stage patter.
Yeah.
To help with the illusion, and then this jerk.
Yeah.
Comes up and is like, oh, it's all just fake. Here's how he did it. Look, the knife is in his sleeve. The basket has a door at the back for the kid to run out. for the sawing the legs trick, whatever, or it's pushing the sword into the basket. And you're watching it thinking, what are you doing that? What am I supposed to take away from this? Is this is this the Westerner coming and exposing the cheats of the Orient? Like, it feels kind of unsavory. But of course, he's the unsavory one because he's there to steal their tricks.
Yes. Now,
I really like that setup and payoff. I like that. Yes. You're saying, what is this? Why is he doing? Does he think he's Harry Houdini running around busting spirit mediums?
Yeah.
You know, no, because he's there to steal without attributing other people's.
Yeah, I think he's just really arrogant.
Yeah.
About his own skills as a magician, and he is supposed to be a great magician, as we're told. But so this guy, this Indian magician has an assistant. Now I'm watching this.
South Asian, unfortunately.
I'm watching this scene initially where he's doing the magic trick where he stabs the boy who's hiding in the basket. And so first of all, he's delivering this whole thing in English. It does make sense. Okay, but anyway, that's what it is.
Okay,
it's fine. Okay, fine. And then I saw this assistant. I'm like, okay, he's got a British assistant who's wearing a sari. That's not what it turns out to be, because she turns out to be the main. After this exposure on stage, this guy goes around our British magician. What was that British magician that was really famous? Les Daniels, was that his name? Anyway, so he goes around and he sees her in an alley and she's doing this magic rope trick.
Yeah.
And at this point, she says, he tries to buy the trick. He examines it very well. It's really plays it pretty well compared to the comic, how he examines the rope and looks for a trapdoor and all that kind of stuff. So it's very clear what he's trying to do to figure out the trick. He's like, I'll buy the trick off you. I'll buy the rope. Or at least tell me the trick.
First of all, she tells him there's no trick, it's magic.
Yes. Which she did in the comic, too. She said it wasn't a trick.
And the power is in the rope. And then he says, can I buy the rope? I'll give you 40,000 rupees or whatever. Yeah. Some colossal sum. And nope, she won't sell it.
Right. So at this point, I'm like, oh, okay, so she's not British. She's supposed to be Indian.
I'm afraid I knew straight away that she was meant to be Indian.
I was trying to give the film the benefit of the doubt, but then she starts giving this speech about how this was passed down from her mother and her grandmother. I'm like, oh, she's like really Indian.
We're supposed to think
and she's putting on a very poor accent. Yeah. It's not even like
it's half-hearted. The early 70s. We're supposed to, the clue for us is that she's wearing a sari because she's in native costume. Sure. She's a native.
But my thing is, normally I'm very forgiving of this kind of thing in movies. If it's from the 70s and you've done some brown face or whatever, I actually don't care most of the time. But two scenes earlier, we had dozens and dozens of Indian extras in the bazaar scene. Why could not one of those people could have read for this
I agree.
role?
I've got it right here. Why couldn't they cast a South Asian to play the girl? It's literally here in my notes.
It would have made this whole sequence scarier, in a sense, to have more authenticity to it.
But I guess it was a bridge too far for the early 70s.
Yeah. Okay, so basically he goes back to he tells his wife about it.
There are some Indian movie posters in the alley.
Yes, I noticed that. Cool. Yeah, that was cool. I actually did notice that. His wife's like, we need to get this trick, so bring her back here. So he comes back to the alley, he says, my wife is sick. Can you demonstrate the trick for her in our hotel?
And she will. So she goes back, she starts to do the trick, he stabs her in the back.
Yes. It seems to be his idea, not Inez's idea, or am I...
I think
I think they're both... Yeah, there's no shock on either part.
They want this trick. Yeah. This is what they've come to India for.
Yeah. So then they...
To rob the natives.
Yes. So then they figure out that...
They put her in the... First they put her in the closet.
Yes.
And they say they're going to put her in the trunk later on. But for now, they're going to try out the trick. Again, he examines it again, still can't figure it out.
Yeah.
He decides to pick up the whatever that instrument's called, the snake charmer flute.
Yeah.
And as he starts to play it, sure enough, the rope, it comes out and it goes up and up. It looks all right. It's an okay effect.
Yeah, I thought it was a good effect.
I read online that there's an obvious black string.
Okay.
But
I wasn't looking for it.
But I think our copy of the film was not really great, so that really helped. We couldn't see the string at all. It looks great. Comes out and she, again, as in the comic, she climbs it. She says, this is just how it's going to be in our act. She does a flourish, which I'm doing now, but you can't see.
And then
And then she climbs the rope, screams, and disappears.
She screams. This is so good. Again, it's a real Hellraiser moment. I love this bit. She screams and then fades out of existence.
Yeah.
And then we see a red stain growing, a red blood stain growing on the ceiling.
The red stain's okay. I must admit, I wanted falling limbs, but that's a tricky kind of effect to do, I guess.
Yes.
The red stains.
But it also doesn't... It doesn't make sense. The falling limbs are great. I love the gore of the falling limbs, but it kind of doesn't make sense in the sense that we don't get much explanation in the comic. In this, I feel she's seen something that horrified her, which we don't get in the comic.
Like the top of the stairs in the Stone Tape.
She has seen the Hell Dimension.
Yeah.
She's seen Pinhead. She's screamed and she's vanished into that place.
Seeing
and now
it has sucked her into the dimension too. She's
Yeah, or
seen
something
things
like
man
that.
was not meant to see.
Yeah, something like that has happened, and it's a really great, mysterious,
Yes.
like, oh my
The mystery's
god,
good.
what happened to her? And there's this blood stain on the ceiling. Why is it on the ceiling?
Unfortunately, the mystery vanishes in the next part of the scene, which is where the rope starts tacking the guy.
Yeah, the rope starts attacking the guy and making these kind of whipping noises, and it's like,
it's a bit
okay.
lame. Again, there's apparently strings.
Yeah, I don't know.
It looks fine.
I actually do think it looks fine. I don't think it's that bad. I think the whipping noise...
But we've gone
they've actually done the whole sequence in slow motion to compensate for the fact that the rope is not actually moving that
We've gone
quickly.
from mystery to the rope kind of like taking physical vengeance on him by whipping him and chasing him around the room. I feel...
Well, I think it's... In the
it's a
comic,
shame.
it just kind of wraps around his neck. It's a bit more subtle, I guess.
And as the rope's whipping him, this is great. The closet falls open.
Yeah.
And the girl falls out, and her eyes are staring wide open.
Yes.
And she stares right into camera, and it looks terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that. It's like that. This similar thing in Ringu. Have you ever seen that film?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where the faces after they've been murdered by the girl.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
Yeah.
Just kind of really horrifying.
Yeah.
Then we cut back to the bazaar. The fakir/faker is up to his return to his.
Yes. Doesn't
his
seem
act.
to. There's no mention. We don't know what his reaction to his assistant being missing is.
Oh no,
or-
we know. We know, because she shows up.
Oh, that's right. Yes, of course.
She shows up. They exchange a look, and he himself looks
Yes, that's
over
right,
his
that's
shoulder,
Right, that's right. Yeah.
and he can see through the window the magician, the Western magician, strung up by his neck with the rope attached to nothing, and him just floating in midair. And he exchanges a look with his now alive again assistant, and I like it. I love it.
Yeah.
So that it was he's been punished for his hubris.
Yes.
They're in it together. The magician and his assistant, they're partners, and they've punished.
Yeah.
They've
Absolutely.
punished the arrogant Westerners.
Yes.
for
Because
their
when he
hubris.
was first exposed by the British guy, they gave each other a look like this guy.
Great. Really great.
It's really good.
Really cool.
But I do
and
think
very true to kind of EC spirit, right?
yes,
So someone's
absolutely.
been punished. An inversion of, like someone's tangled with something that they didn't understand and they've been punished.
Yes.
For it. Someone didn't respect the culture.
Yeah. Okay. That
belong to another
That
people.
leads to my next point, which is I think with this, I think because of the brown face, I was more forgiving of the Orientalism in the comic
Right.
from 55 than I was in this brown face in the movie from 73. And I've been, this, as I just said before, I always forgive this kind of stuff. And I've been rereading The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, and that has a lot of the same stuff, like mystical Indians that have strange powers or whatever, or show up. And I'm like, okay, fine, I actually have no issue with that specifically. But somehow in this, it's like, okay, we're starting to... I think if they had just cast that one difference would have made it more forgivable. Anyway, so let's...
I mean, I'm as aware. I also am always on the lookout for Orientalism.
Yeah.
But I thought this one handled it. I thought it handled it pretty well in such a short segment.
Yeah.
I mean, they
yes, the Bazaar
really,
was good. Like the cast in the Bazaar, all those extras. I was like, this is good. Oh, also, by the way, I love that there's a moment with sitar music which goes throughout. There's a bunch of sitar music. But when he she's playing the flute to get in the hotel room. She's playing the flute, and the rope's going up the ceiling. So we're getting that flute noise.
Yeah.
That
the snake charmer thing.
Yes. Yeah. That reedy noise. Yes. And he stabs her, and the instant he stabs her, the sitar music starts up again. I was like, that's such a great, funny little bit that I really loved. Right. Okay. So
Next segment.
Yes, Bargain in Death. Okay. Yeah. So. This one, okay, so we've swapped things around here. So in this one, we start with the guys in the insurance scam. Yes. We don't start with the medical students. So this is another interesting change.
Yeah.
The guy who proposes to be buried alive is the one with the medicine.
Was that not what it was in the comic?
I feel like it was. I feel like in the comic that Alex convinced him to do it, but I better double check that.
It doesn't matter, because, as you say, it's much more effective.
He's like, here's my idea. I'm going to inject myself with this thing. We're going to get this insurance. You're going to wake me up. We're going to split the money and get out of town.
Yeah.
And he gets this idea because he's a horror writer. And he's reading the Tales from the Crypt novelization in a very cheeky close-up of the book cover.
I spotted it from, like, way out, and I thought, oh... What a great little reference. Oh, we're getting closer. Oh, it's really zooming right in. And in fact, we're zooming right in on the name of the guy who wrote it. That guy, Jack Olek, who we discussed last week. And I thought, oh, okay, I feel less clever for spotting it now. But on the other hand, did you notice on the table is a hardback compendium of EC comics?
Oh, I didn't notice that. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite big.
Okay.
Quite like a large, almost like larger than A4.
Like a coffee table.
Yeah, like a coffee table book.
Okay.
And you can quite plainly see the old lady, the crypt keeper, and the other guy in there.
I wonder if that's a mock-up, or I don't know if any hardcover like that actually existed at the time.
It's called Horror Comics, so maybe it was a mock-up.
Okay. I
feel like with this story, they shoved a bunch of Easter eggs in it because it's the briefest and perhaps the kind of like simplest of all the tales.
Yes, maybe so. Yeah. So interesting thing here. So the guy takes the medicine and dies.
Yeah.
Seemingly dies, and the landlady comes in. She freaks out at the body, and then we see the two.
No, first of all, before I hate to do this. I'm sorry. I hate to do this. You're right. He injects himself with the serum, and then he just sort of walks around the room a bit, looking at things. He picks up a box of matches and puts it in his coat pocket, which is a nice touch.
Yeah,
because this segment began with him in the coffin lighting matches.
That's right. Yes. Okay.
And before he's discovered, we cut to the medical
students, yes,
who are reading their big anatomy textbook, saying, "I'm never going to get this. I just can't come to grips with anatomy." And it's like, if only I had more time to work on the bodies.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah, unfortunately, we only have the time that we're assigned in the lab." He goes, "If only we had a body of our own." It's like, yeah, right.
Yes.
So then the landlady discovers the guy, and then it turns out
it's the same medical building. This was a good touch.
Really,
it made it
really
less coincidental.
Yes.
Because it's like they're in the same building as this guy. They're like, this guy just died.
They come when she screams.
Yes.
And then when they look at him and take his pulse, then they look at one another.
Yeah.
Delighted. Because they think, this is it.
Yeah.
We were just talking about how we wish we had a body.
Yes, but there's no talk about the embalming in this one. They're never like... The guy who's getting killed is never like, make sure they don't embalm me, make sure I'm buried in 12 hours, and all that sort of stuff. So there's a bit of a plot. They've added a plot hole by taking that out.
I think we're just left to assume it. It's fine. With these, you have a problem with these because the storytelling in these 8-page comics relies so heavily on the captions.
Yes, exactly.
To tell us what's going on.
Yes. And I wonder if that HBO show, like the Crypt Keeper, actually spoke throughout the episodes and gave information.
They don't. But it's much longer. They're 40, 50 minute kind of like 40-minute episodes. Yeah. So they have plenty of time to tell it.
Yeah.
I've seen a few. Sometimes there'll be, but the Crypt Keeper doesn't talk during them. No.
Well, I'm wondering if we had a Crypt Keeper in this movie that could give us a voiceover.
I think the film deals pretty well with it, especially in the next one, the Drawn and Quartered. This one, there's a couple of artificial lines of dialogue because we have to get across the message that they're planning to double cross one another.
Yes.
So first of all, as we know from the comic, the digger-upper is planning to double cross the internee because we already know that. So they actually have to say it in dialogue. So the guy that's going to be buried, as soon as the digger-upper leaves the room, digger-upper, sorry.
The grave robber.
The grave robber guy, yep. He pulls out a gun.
Right.
So the guy, the internee, pulls out a gun and says, "If only you knew, I'm going to shoot you as soon as we collect that money and take it all."
Yes.
And then he aims the gun at the wall.
Yeah, there were a few lines said out loud in this movie, yes.
Especially in this particular story. And it's the same with the grave robber driving his car later on. "Oh, Alex.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I wish I were there to see you when you realize I'm not coming to dig you up. I'm going to leave you in that grave."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So basically plays out the same. They dig him up. Why in movies when people dig graves are they always perfect rectangles? Surely if you were digging up a grave it would be like a mess.
I don't know. I've never dug a grave.
Anyway, so it basically plays out the same. The body sits up when they dig him up. The two students run away.
Yeah.
Alex sees them and swerves to avoid them and hits. The car explodes. The students seem to have very little reaction to this.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, a car just exploded. Also, they're not reacting to the fact that a body just sat up in his grave. They're not talking about either of these things to each other.
Yeah.
They're just like, okay, whatever. And then they go back.
The guy calls them back.
Yes, the guy calls them back, right.
He goes, "Oh, I'm ready for you to pay me now.
Yeah.
Sorry about the damage to the head."
Yeah.
And then we have a pretty good shot. We pan down to his crowbar. It's dripping with blood. We pan left. And it's not Alex, it's the guy,
Yes.
the injectee, in his grave with a great big hole in his head.
Yeah.
And then end. It's probably the weakest of all the stories in this particular film. Still alright though.
There is
really
some, when they run away, there's some kind of comedy music going on.
Yeah, like carnival music or something. Or like Benny Hill.
Yeah, almost like that.
And I'm thinking, why are they doing this?
Well, I think they were trying to like...
Comedy.
This is why... You know, the Crypt Keeper had the wrong tone in the last movie, how I talked about that? Like, you gotta... These stories in the comics...
There's always a strong vein of comedy running
There is, and it's supposed to be like, oh, look at that gross thing that happened, but then you have a laugh about what the Crypt Keeper says about it or something.
Yes.
There's kind of a double release there.
Yeah, they're going for that. But it absolutely didn't pay off. But, which is funny, because earlier on, I think there's some genuine tension when they're playing that long, kind of like note on violin, like...
Yes.
As he's getting ready to inject himself.
Yeah.
And because we know it's going to go wrong. Because we're watching a horror movie.
Yeah.
So I actually, my heart was sort of like starting to beat a little fast, started to rise up in my throat. Yeah. You know, I'm starting to get nervous for this guy. Even though he was a scumbag who was going to shoot his partner as soon as he was dug up.
Right.
But then, of course, and then we have... Like, the gravedigger is throwing dirt on the medical
there's
students.
a whole comedy routine, and then the guy's like, stop throwing dirt at me, the medical student, stop throwing dirt at me, and he walks around to the other side, and the guy throws dirt elsewhere, which hits the guy again in the face.
It's very slapstick.
And his friend is like laughing at this.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're digging up a grave and you're having some chuckles?
Show some
like,
damn respect.
Like, you should be a bit nervous or something.
Yeah.
Yes, it's played a bit weird.
Alright, on to the last and best vignette of the film, drawn and quartered.
Yes. Okay, so this one's starring Tom Baker. Was this pre-Doctor Who?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, we start with a painter, Moore, in Haiti. He's working on a self-portrait, and instantly this guy, his friend, walks into his hut, and he says, "Hey, did you hear a painting was selling for $5,000 in this gallery from these three guys?" And he's like, "What?" And then he says, "Oh, I'm going to get revenge." Now, we haven't had a Crypt Keeper to tell us why he needs revenge.
No.
He just, I'm going to get revenge on these guys. We don't.
Well, he doesn't say anything about revenge. No. This is really some great brevity in storytelling. I think they wanted to get the most out of this set, which is his Haiti hut.
Yeah.
Which looks pretty good, actually. And so Tom Baker's painting, as you said, his friend walks in. "Hey, did you hear you're painting yourself for $5,000? Well, no. He walks in
It's
and he says,
essentially like
do you know who I am? It's you!
Yeah.
Man, it's like, you must be so happy because your painting sold for so much money.
Right.
It's like, what do you mean? No painting of mine has ever sold for that much. My paintings are no good.
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z told me. And it's like, what do you mean X, Y, and Z? X sold that painting. And Y writes in all the papers about how great it is. And Z is, whatever. And then, and Tom Baker's like, what? And then we cut to, straight to the tribal drums.
Yes. We don't get to see all the dancers. We just got one guy in his little hut. This is...
And why is he here? We don't know. We know he's in Haiti. We can hear tribal drums. It's nighttime now. He walks in. Why are you here? Says the ethnic caricature. And Tom Baker says, I want voodoo. I want to buy voodoo. I want to buy a voodoo. And he's great Tom Baker voice. His beautiful voice. And the guy says, why? Because I want revenge on those that have wronged me.
Yeah.
Great. I feel like we know everything we need to know.
I'm not sure that we do, but okay, I'll accept that for now. Because it is explained later. He's very clear about his
I think it's just
later
slightly
on.
different storytelling. Like,
Yes.
we've got a mystery.
Yes.
Because we're coming from it knowing everything, having just read the comic this week. I think a person coming into it fresh, not knowing anything, what's happened? Who is this painter? Why is he living in a shack?
Okay.
Why has he reacted to hearing these names? Now he's buying voodoo because he wants revenge?
I think part of the problem is that it's not clear that his life is miserable and destitute.
Sure.
I think it's kind of like, oh, I would like to live in that hut.
Yeah, because it's beautiful.
I would like to go to that place for a week.
Good point. It looks like a tropical paradise.
Oh, yeah.
Almost, right?
He's painting?
He's
in a
painting
tropical paradise?
In a breezy shirt.
This is the life.
Good point. I think we're both right.
Yes, I think we're both right.
I love it when we're both right.
But I also think that this is the second ethnic stereotype problem that this movie has. Now, all voodoo movies, I think there's very few that have tried to correct the portrayal of voodoo. I think there's like one or two movies that have actually tried to do right by voodoo. It's very British. I want to say this is what it is, and I don't know why I'm more accepting of it in the comics than I am in the movies. I think there's something.
Comics are older.
The comics are older, but there's also something about somebody putting on an accent,
right? Sure.
Or paying an actor that was desperate for work to, there's all kinds of things that come into your mind. Sure. Maybe also the comics, well, I guess the comics were read by a lot of people at the time, so they maybe did do some damage, but...
It's not great. I mean, yeah, they paid some poor bloke to put...
But fortunately,
it's feathers on his arms, and...
It's pretty quick, and...
It is over quickly.
His accent is not like... He doesn't have... He also... he speaks in Pidgin English in the comic, which he does not in the movie.
No, he's quite well spoken.
Which is quite good.
And he's in the know as well. Again, we have...
Yes.
Because it's pretty obvious that whatever a voodoo man is called, Hongun or something, knows that that Tom Baker's going to come to a bad end. Right. Yes. He knows that he's been inspired. He wants to use his sacred knowledge for evil. Yeah. And he has a big grin on his face when he walks out. Yeah. Yes. So Tom Baker puts his hand
in the cauldron, like in the comic, and then he's asked for the voodoo doll. The guy's like, "No voodoo doll, you're an artist, you can draw," and he just pays him. And it's, I don't get there's no doubt like there was in the. There is. It's almost why did he? I almost feel like shouldn't he have argued about paying this guy when he didn't do anything for him?
He's made an effort to do it without speaking. Right. To a debatable effect. I mean, he takes his hand out and he looks at it. Yeah. There's a lot of that in this story, which I really like. It's very, very short on dialogue. Yeah. And very, very... Which is a shame, really, because Tom Baker has such a nice voice. But very, very big on Tom Baker reacting to things, looking at things. Yes. Which I think is great. Some really great non-verbal storytelling in this segment.
Yes. But he does have hardly any reaction to the voodoo, like... It's hard to tell if if he doubts it or he's like, oh, now I have voodoo powers or what. He's just like, as you said,
you're right. It's really. I agree. It's really understated, and I think that's okay.
Okay. Well, so he pays the guy. He's just like, okay, I'll pay you, even though you didn't do anything for me. He doesn't argue about it.
Again, I like that. I like the mystery of it. Why did he do that?
Painting, decides to sit down and do a drawing of the vase, and then he tears it up, and then the vase falls and smashes.
All without dialogue. Again,
But again, he just looks at it, and there's I don't think there's even a beat. I think he just starts drawing the bread.
Right. It does happen really quickly.
It's not like, oh.
He goes straight to the bench and cuts a slice of bread.
Yeah.
And like, what?
Yeah. Well,
why are you cutting a slice of bread?
The vase fell on the floor. I'm going to cut
a slice of bread.
What? Okay.
I agree. I think it's assuming a lot. I mean, Tom Baker can act.
Yeah.
I think it's assuming a lot of us, the audience.
Yes.
Like, Tom Baker is clearly wondering if he's got his money's worth.
Right.
And when the vase breaks, he's straight on it.
Yeah.
Could this be it? Go straight to the bench. But it's not obvious.
No, his face doesn't say, could this be it? His face is just like, I'm going to cut.
He's got his back to us.
Yeah.
So, I can see how it would be frustrating, but I did really like it.
So then it kind of plays out the same. After the bread, he gets the money, he goes back to...
The rat comes in and eats part of it.
Eats the bread.
He does, and then he again, without words...
cuts the face, yeah.
What's done in captions and actual speech balloons in the comic. Oh, I must take care of my painting. In this, he just looks at the painting.
Yeah.
It's like, you're looking at that painting because you've just been working on it with your magic voodoo hand. And he goes up to it. This is the longest segment in the film because it takes its time with some things. Didn't take its time with cutting the bread. Took its time with this. He walks up to the painting, looks at it for a while, and then he gets his brush, some red paint, and he draws a little red line down his right cheek. Or actually, it would be his left cheek because it's mirrored in the painting. And then he goes to bed. He has a nightmare. We get the tribal drums. Tribal drums are really loud.
Yeah.
We get the tribal drums. And then he falls out of bed onto, again, like in the comic, he falls onto the vase, which in this case is in a bin, like a wastebasket. Cuts it in the exact same way.
Yeah.
I have the power.
Yeah.
Then in a 10-second segment, he meets with the same guy, the one who told him about the paintings, who gives him the money.
Yep.
He goes, I'll pay you all back when I get to London, and more beside. Bam, end scene.
Yep.
Next thing is, he's in London getting his lodgings back.
Yes.
From the landlord, who he doesn't punish for the painting in this one, which is a slight improvement. Instead, he meets with the three scam artists. Yes. Confronts them.
Yes, now this is where we finally get the clear reasons that he wants revenge against each
so this
three
is
of
not
these
this is not a segment that's not a storytelling beat that's in the comic because it's all been explained at the start.
Yeah.
So I like this. I think this is stronger, but I
think this is good. Also, we have to mention that the art gallery guy is Denholm Elliott.
Yeah. Marcus Brody.
Yes.
Indiana Jones.
Yes. He confronts him. He says he's going to get his revenge on them. They laugh at him.
They laugh at him. I wouldn't have laughed at Tom Baker. He looks like a goddamn maniac.
Yeah. Yeah, he really does.
So then he goes back to his studio. So first of all, he's got a safe and he's locked his painting in it, much like in the comic.
Yes.
He goes back to his studio. He paints his 3 paintings. Now we do get some dialogue. And it's great. He looks at the first painting and goes, "You looked at my paintings and said they weren't worth anything. Well, now you won't look at another painting again."
Yeah.
He gets, I think it's the other end of a paintbrush, maybe?
Yeah.
And he shoves it in the eye sockets, punctures it through the painting. In quite a long, it's like squeaking, he's grinding it in. We cut to him, it's the same as in the comic. He's a philanderer, she throws acid in his face. Bam.
Yeah.
Next,
it's the guy with the hands. What was
it? You said my paintings weren't good, that you couldn't handle them.
Right.
Much better than the comic, which was underhanded.
Yeah.
Well, you won't handle my paintings or anyone else's ever again.
Yes, that's good, actually.
And then he rips out the hands.
Yeah.
And we get quite a long sequence where we establish that this guy is an asshole.
Yeah.
Because he's really cruel to his assistant who's using the mat, 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 the mat,
Yeah,
guy
it's
just
a great,
straight up chops his hands off.
great moment of it. But weirdly, no reaction from the other two people in the room.
Yeah. They're probably just happy because he's such a jerk.
They're just like, there's
been waiting for that to
scream or something would have been.
It's
good.
just him that screams, "Oh God, no! I don't have any hands!"
Yeah, and the other two people in the room are just like
just
no
staring.
reaction.
That's a good point. I didn't even notice.
Okay, now we get to the Denholm Elliott bit.
Oh, this is so great.
Well, is it great? Because he brings the painting of Denholm Elliott to his office. He leaves his Omega watch on the table. He says, "You're going to die."
Watch. He wants to watch it. So first of all, Marcus Brody knows what's happening because he's reading a paper.
Yeah.
He's expecting Tom Baker.
Yeah.
And his secretary buzzes through. Mr. Moore is here to see you. And he's like, yeah. Let him in and you go home. Because there's going to be some mayhem.
Okay.
Anyway, Tom Baker comes in. Hello. You have 2 minutes to live. No. First of all, he says, I see you've read about the others.
Right, yes.
Because he's holding a paper. Yeah. Great. Marcus Brody doesn't say anything. So Tom Baker just puts the watch down in front of him, says, look at that. You have 2 minutes to live. Mm. He walks across the other side of the room, starts to unwrap his painting. Marcus Brody stands up. He has a pistol.
Yeah.
That's far enough. Don't move. Tom Baker says, I just want to show you something. He unwraps the painting, reaches into his pocket. Gets a reaction from Marcus. He raises the pistol. He goes, don't worry, it's just a red pen. And then he draws a little dot.
Yep.
Right between the eyes on the painting.
Yep.
And then bang, out come the tribal drums again. And he's compelled to shoot himself. Yes,
he struggles against his gun. His hand is turning. It's shaking as he's turning his gun on himself. And she's okay. My problem with this is the first guy's girlfriend threw acid in his face.
Yep.
The second guy, the guillotine happened to fall on his hands. This guy's, he doesn't get killed by coincidence or accident. The gun turns. That's not the way it works.
Well, it is the way it works.
No,
because it's the way it's worked.
The vase, the wind fell, the rat came and ate the bread. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Something else happens.
It's nice when things have rules, but this is magic.
Yes, but it's inconsistent magic. And I think the thing is, they've solved the problem of killing the art dealer, which Al Feldstein hadn't solved in the comic, but they haven't solved it in a way that adds up with the rest of the five other incidents.
I know what you mean, and that did occur to me as well, but I give it a pass because there's magic working here. And also, Baker himself is magic now. He has a magic hand.
Yes.
He's come to see it work in person. It's almost he doesn't control it, right? But it's almost like he can feel what will happen.
Look, what I'm saying is...
He has a malign power. It's his greed and his hate, and it's finding deadly expression. This guy is being... Is he got a sudden crippling attack of depression? Does he feel compelled to shoot himself?
Well, then he wouldn't have the shaking. He's fighting his hand like it's possessed.
I don't have a problem.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, by the way this scene works, earlier when he put the slice of paint on his own face, his hand should have cut his own face with a razor in that moment. That's not what happens. He sleeps all night and his head falls into the basket.
It's just work. Well, I mean, why didn't the cut happen instantly? It happened hours later.
Yeah.
It just works differently depending on circumstances. I don't have a problem with it.
But this is the only circumstance where you see it physically
compel someone
to do what the painting shows.
Perhaps the rat was compelled. Was the wife compelled?
Yes, but the bread didn't just rot away.
No.
A rat came
instead
and ate
the rat was compelled, though. So the compulsion can occur.
If the secretary walked in and said, you said you were going to leave your wife, and shot him in the head, that would have worked.
But then the secretary would have been compelled.
Yes, but that's fine. It's like some chance
it's still
thing.
Interfering with free will.
Yes, but it doesn't, she's not like, it's not like her hand is possessed, like, why do I want to shoot my boss?
I like to think that, unconsciously, Moore has set up a situation where the only outcome is him shooting himself. He's
Okay, yeah, but even if that, I would like to see him suddenly become depressed and shoot himself. Instead of his hand shaking like it's in Evil Dead 2, and it's a hand that's disassociated from his body.
Yeah. I think maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I thought that's what was going to happen. I thought he was going to have a sudden fit of...
Well, I was like, how's this going to resolve itself? I said, how's he going to shoot himself in the head?
Conscience, a sudden attack of conscience, and realize he should never have cheated Tom Baker and then shot himself. But I don't have a problem with it because there's magic.
Okay. So then he starts to suffocate.
Yes.
And he's like,
great story. This is great. So he has to rush back to the flat, and then we cut to the desk. He's left his watch on it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So he has to rush back to his studio quickly. You know, he's panting. He's drenched in sweat. He's looking at the combination on a piece of paper, desperately trying to get the safe open. He gets it open. Suddenly he can breathe again.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we get a moment, he's sitting thinking, well, it can't stay in there. He takes it out, and he puts it on an easel.
Well,
under the window.
It could stay in there, with the door open. It being out in the open on an easel is not any better.
He's not thinking straight.
That's right. Okay, yes.
It's clear he's not thinking straight, because the next thing that happens is he looks at his wrist to see the time.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh shit, I left my watch there. That's evidence. You know, again, without dialogue, it's all
I didn't even think about it. I just thought about it as a $10,000 Omega watch, was my thinking.
No, what are you kidding? He's a magic man.
Right.
Anyway, but this is the thing, he's not thinking straight, because if he was thinking straight, he'd paint the watch out of existence.
Right.
Or paint it back on his wrist. You know, and then it would fly back, because we've established that magic is magic, Kumar.
Right, okay.
But no, he's not thinking straight, so he dashes into the street to hail a taxi, leaving the painting in a vulnerable position, which he never would have done if he was in his right mind. Right. So then we have a great bit where we can see the guy painting out, you know, the guy applying varnish or turpentine or whatever it is out on the billboard, out on the billboard outside the window. Cut to Tom Baker running around in the street trying and failing to hail a taxi over and over. Back to the guy painting again. He nudges the box of terps a little closer. Tom Baker. Painter. Tom Baker.
Yeah.
Then the terps falls, knocks the painting over. Tom Baker's in the street. He turns around and sees a truck. The truck runs over him.
Yes.
We see it run over his head. He's face down, though, in his wonderful corduroy suit. He's face down, though, and we see the wheel go over his head. And then we cut back to the painting. And the painting looks fucking terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really messed up.
And so good. We're just, in our mind's eye, we're wondering, what does his face look like? What must his face look like under that tyre?
Yeah.
Because this is what the painting looks like.
Yeah.
And it looks horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But note that he didn't mangle his own face. He had to get hit by a truck.
Yes.
Okay, so then we cut back...
My skin was crawling when I'm looking at this picture.
So we cut back to the basement of the high-rise where the five guys are sitting around, and then they just sort of walk off. A door opens, or the elevator door opens, and outside it's a graveyard.
It's not even an elevator, it's a graveyard.
Yeah. And they sort of look around and just walk into the graveyard, and they all just fade.
Yeah.
Except for one guy...
who's not Tom Baker.
No.
Because that was a fake out. Tom Baker is not behind everything, despite being the most sinister member
I don't even
of the
think
company.
this guy's behind everything.
No, he's not. But, I mean, I think they were teasing
Right,
that.
okay.
And then it's which guy is it? It's the magician.
Yes.
He says, this is our punishment.
Yeah, we're doomed to repeat the same story.
We have to tell our stories over and over every night for all eternity.
And then he walks back into the circle room where there's a big tomb in there, and then he vanishes into the Vault of Horror, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course that's the Vault of Horror.
Yeah.
And we have a sort of ending theme, and it's Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique.
Okay.
It's not exactly the Symphonie Fantastique.
Okay.
They're doing a variation on the theme.
Okay.
Which is also the theme from The Shining. Dun, dun, dun,
Okay,
dun,
yes.
dun, dun, dun. Great.
Yeah.
That movement is called Dream of a Night on the Sabbath, and it has
Yes.
little witches dancing and skeletons dancing. It's very cool. Yeah, pretty great.
Okay.
You go first. Do you have something to say?
No, I was just about to go into our ratings.
Oh no, I've got something to say first.
Okay.
I really like this framing device.
Okay.
I really, really like this framing device, and I'll tell you why. Now, online, some people say, "What kind of hell is this? They get to drink whiskey and just tell a story? What kind of infernal punishment is this?" I think this is a reference to the Jean-Paul Sartre play No Exit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is, in that play, 3 sinners are in hell, and they're trapped in a room together,
Yep.
and they are forced to recount their sins
Yes.
to one another and judge one another
Right.
over and over and over,
Right.
and they can't escape. This is the play where we get the expression "hell is other people."
Yes.
Yeah. So, this is, Sartre said that the act of observing and being aware of being observed is a kind of torture that defines your existence.
Right.
So for these guys, learning that all of these people are scumbags, and that you're one of them, and what's more, being judged by these scumbags as a scumbag is a torture that they're going through every single night after night. And the films, I think the films are absolutely playing with it because they're all curious. Especially, Tom Baker seems the most aware of the lot.
And they're also they are judgy of each other.
Yeah.
They're like, what? That's just a nightmare or something. You know what? Now that you've put it that way, it actually is it would be worse with a host.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just got to be those guys.
Yes. I think that's what they're going for. I think they've realised, I might be giving the film a little too much credit, but I think they've realised that you couldn't really bring back the Crypt Keeper again because everybody knows the gimmick now.
Well, I think you could. They brought him back for hundreds of episodes on HBO.
But then he's back to his wisecracking self.
Yes.
So in the first film, I see.
If you had that same Crypt Keeper, it wouldn't work. I agree. That's true. Yeah.
That's what I think's happening here. So I think someone, the script writer, is that guy that you mentioned. I think he's hit
Subotsky. Yeah.
He's read his Sartre, so I think he's playing with that.
He might have not read it. He might have just. I think it's been used besides Sartre. I think it's been done a few times since.
I mean,
maybe
everybody knows how there's other people. Yep. So I'm happy to move on to that's my.
Okay, so let's rate these comics.
Yeah, yay! They're great. I love them.
Yeah. I do think Midnight Mass is the weaker one.
Yes, sure. I think the Buried Alive one is the weakest in my opinion, but Midnight Mass is pretty bad too.
Yeah, but Midnight Mass has the. Oh yeah.
But they're still. I mean, I love these comics. I just like you. I'd read them before. I read them every now and again. I just come back to them. They're great in small doses. Wonderful.
Yeah. I think Meat Job is so great, actually, as well. Okay, the movie. I think you're a clear yay on this
100%.
I'm a yay. I don't remember what I said about last week's movie.
You were a yay last week.
Okay. I'm not as high a yay as you. I think there's a lot of... I didn't like the Orientalism. I didn't like the non-reactions to stuff in several scenes.
It is noticeable. I agree. I kept thinking, why doesn't Tom Baker give us a bit more?
Yeah.
Why doesn't he look a bit more horrified?
Yeah. Initially, I didn't like the lack of a horror host, but you just changed my mind on that. That it actually works better without. So not as high a as you, but definitely yay. Adaptation.
I'm going to say yay.
Okay.
I think this has made some really clever choices. In terms of storytelling.
Yeah.
Midnight Mass, I think having him kill the sister and then her turn out to be a vampire.
Yeah.
It's really taken some of these, really. I mean, there's only so much you can do with 8 pages.
Yeah.
I think they've taken some of these stories and really kind of run with them and fleshed them out a bit. Similar with Buried Alive. I love that the med students are just down the hall. and they
Yes.
find him.
Yes. So I think
So they're not just paying a gravedigger to dig up a random cadaver. It's a stupid, like it's literally a crime of opportunity.
Yeah.
They exchange that look.
Yeah. I think I think my feeling about this movie is that all those things you mentioned are good. All the additions are good. But I think they've subtracted some things, and I think the result is it balances out. So I'm going to say yay. But there's things like the tone of Neat Job is so different, but it balances out in her performance and her maniacal laughing at the end of it. And like the plot point about the embalming being missing, like they've taken stuff and they've added stuff, and I think it all pretty much works out.
Yeah. I think it's much tighter.
And like as I've gone at length, they've added in the death of the art dealer, but they've done it in a way that did not satisfy me.
But it bugged you. It clearly bugged you, and I couldn't persuade you despite 10 minutes of heated argument.
So I'm going to say yay for adaptation.
I think this is even tighter. I mean, I was a yay last week as well.
Yeah.
But I think this is in terms of screenwriting adaptation, I think this is an even tighter film.
And I do think the humor they went for in Neat Job was like more of an attempt to capture the humor of the EC Comics than they did in Tales from the Crypt, the movie, where they weren't trying to do anything. I don't think there were any jokes in that one, really, that I remember.
Right, no, you're right. You're right. So the fact that there's humour at all in this one is already making it a better adaptation since it's carrying over that element. Yeah.
Okay, so before we get to next week's episode, I want to remind people to check out our Patreon, which has no perks whatsoever. You don't even get early episodes. It's at Comic Book Movie Oblivion.
Well, if we start getting more Patreons, then we might have to come up with
some absolutely, we will. So be the first, and we'll change our minds about that. Please visit our Facebook group, and also subscribe, and rate and review, depending on
Come see Facebook and see my film debut in 1993.
Wow.
As a boy chorister.
Yeah. That was a shocker. Okay, so next week we're going to look at Speed Racer by the Wachowski sisters. I think it's from 2008 or 2007.
It's from a while ago, yes.
Now, it's based on a comic by Tatsuo Yoshida called Pilot Ace, which you cannot get. There's a English scanlation. If you look hard for it, you might find it. But that became Speed Racer, the animation. The studio was set up by the three brothers, Tatsuo Yoshida, I can't remember the name of the older brother, and the other one was Ippei Kuri. And Ippei Kuri died last week, which is why I've chosen to necrocast based on that death.
That's what we do.
We're going. Yes, exactly. So
we'll see you next week for some grave digging.